Hello and welcome, I'm Joshua Barnes and you're watching NewsX World. Let's first take a look at our headlines. Following threats from Donald Trump, Hamas says that any Israeli military action against Palestinians will lead to the killing of hostages. US President Donald Trump says Russia and Ukraine have no choice but to agree a peace deal as talks with Ukraine are scheduled in Saudi Arabia next week. Meanwhile, Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk says work is underway to make all adult men undergo military training amid what he calls potential threats. A South Korean court has ordered the release of Yoon Suk-yeol after cancelling the arrest warrant of the suspended president. Paris auto star services have been cancelled after an unexploded World War II bomb was found near the Gare du Nord station, causing travel chaos and leading to evacuations. We start in the Middle East, and recent reports from Israel reveal that the Israeli army set fire to Al Nasser Mosque in Nablus and blocked firefighters from putting out the blaze. This attack is part of broader patterns of assaults on religious sites in the occupied West Bank during Ramadan. And it has been 6 days since Israel blocked all aid supplies from entering Gaza, raising concerns about rising hunger and a lack of drinking water in the war-torn region. Here's what the citizens have to say.
محرومين جدا الشعب المسلم الشعب الفلسطيني شعب الداخل وين ما كان محرومين انه يروحوا على الاقصى بس اليهود والمستوطنين مسموح لهم
إلنا حق عبادة ولكل المسلمين بس لكن هم ما بيعترفوا بهذا الحق.
Meanwhile, Hamas has condemned Israel's aggression against Muslim religious sites in the occupied West Bank, calling it part of a religious war on our people and our land. They criticised the attacks on mosques in Nablus and Hebron, noting that some rooms were set on fire and worshippers were blocked from performing the dawn prayer. The group also condemned settlers storming Al-Aqsa Mosque in Israeli efforts to take control of the Ibrahim Mosque in Hebron. Joining us to discuss these topics, we have Aharon Levako, Israeli television and radio correspondent, who's joining us from Netanya in Israel. Before we come on to what I've just spoken about, Aharon, I would like to get your opinion on the statements that have come from Hamas today, specifically looking at the claim that hostages will die if any further military action happens from Israeli forces. What is your feeling on that, and what do you think the response will be from Benjamin Netanyahu in this tricky point?
Well, I think that kind of news is every Israeli nightmare. They fear this would happen. And listen, it's been happening. They have been murdering some of the hostages. We have received back about 24 dead hostages. So it's not new to us, but we are doing all we can to get back our hostages alive. So this kind of the threat is part of the psychological warfare that Hamas are playing. Now, what is Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu going to do? And what is our new defense minister and our new top general going to do about it? We're going to see. We're going to see what we're going to do about it. Let me tell you that 50,000 Israeli soldiers have been called up, and up to 400,000 soldiers have been put on readiness. If the hostages aren't returned, or if they are killed, then you can guarantee that it's going to be a bloody mess in Gaza. Look, Hamas's days are finished as far as the Israeli government is concerned. It's just a matter of when, and it's just a matter of can we get back some of those hostages alive rather than dead. It's a complicated situation. Hamas knew what they were doing on October the 7th when they kidnapped 228 Israelis. They knew exactly the leverage that they would have over the government, and they were proved right. And it's been a nightmare firstly for the hostages, then for the families, and then for the nation, who hold every life with the highest of value. That is the issue here. We celebrate life here in Israel, and that's kind of our strength, but it's also our weakness, and Hamas are playing on that weakness.
Yes, I'd like to build now on what I spoke about briefly, looking at reports that mosques are being set on fire during this holy time of Ramadan. What first is your opinion to these reports coming out of the West Bank, and also how destabilising could that be? We are, of course, during a holy month of Ramadan. There is then the Jewish Passover period as well. So this can't be positive for any look forward to peace.
No, I can tell you this. I am going to wait until the investigation is thorough before I start believing that the Israeli army are burning mosques. We have thousands and thousands of mosques here in Israel. I'm a tour guide. I take people all around the country and I show mosques. We're a democracy. We respect freedom of religion. We do not go and burn mosques. So until the investigation is thorough and complete, I'm not going to say we did it. If we did it, then I will respond until the investigation is complete, because once again, propaganda, psychological warfare, and winning through the media are Hamas's strategy. They wage guerrilla warfare, and they are very good at it. At the very beginning of the war, they caused a mass amount of death in a hospital. Who got the blame? Israel, until it was proven that it was Hamas. So I'm not going to say it was Hamas, and I'm not going to say it's Israel. Let's wait until the investigation is done. But I can tell you this, that if our soldiers did that, then they will be held accountable, because in our military rooms, we have members of the humanitarian rights groups, we have judges, we have lawyers, and they are there to make sure our military works within the framework of international law. A British colonel, Mr. Kemp, who sits in those offices, he says there's no more morally high military in the history of the annals of human history than the Israeli Defense Forces. Some people may be laughing as they listen to me, but that's his testimony.
I want to now look towards ceasefire negotiations. Hamas designation has gone to Cairo to resume talks, but we are still currently in an impasse. To bring this discussion to a close, with so much going on, so much difficulty being suffered by both sides, Palestinians living in Gaza, people living in Israel, with the situation with hostages and the rhetoric that Hamas are using when talking about those hostages. How vital is it, in your opinion, that these ceasefire negotiations happen and come to a resolution?
Listen, we're tired. This is a war of attrition. The nation are tired. People want to go back to their homes. Tens of thousands of people are still living in hotels where they've been living for 16 months. We want this to finish. Hamas can hand over the hostages today and the war will be over. The problem is they're playing hardball. They're asking that the Israeli forces pull out of Gaza, stop fighting. We're asking for our hostages back. So, there is a kind of a breakdown in the negotiations, and yet there are efforts, as you said, from Egypt, from Qatar. President Trump put a new offer on the table yesterday by offering Hamas an extra 60 days ceasefire if they hand back 10 living hostages. That's a pretty good deal for Hamas, but they have refused. So it's not an easy situation. As I said, Hamas, they have the leverage. It's up to them. But time is running out. Patience is running out. Trump's patience has run out. It looks like Benjamin Netanyahu's patience, and our defense minister, Israel Katz, his patience is running out. These next week or two are going to be crucial. If Hamas don't hand over the hostages, I'm telling you, all hell is going to break out. No question about it. The ball is in Hamas's court. The hostages are in their court. We want them back, period.
Aharon Levarko, thank you very much for providing your insight. We will, of course, continue to bring you all the updates from Gaza, Israel and abroad. We now move, and Russia has launched a major drone and missile attack on Ukrainian energy facilities. The strikes targeted areas from Kharkiv in the east to Ternopil in the west. In response, President Zelensky called for a halt to aerial and naval attacks on critical infrastructure. Zelensky took to social media to emphasise Ukraine's readiness for peace and urged Russia to stop the war. He wrote for silence in the skies, to ban the use of missiles, long-range drones and aerial bombs, and silence at the sea for a guarantee of normal navigation. Meanwhile, Turkish President Erdogan expressed support for Zelensky's call for a ceasefire, advocating for confidence-building measures, including halting air and sea attacks. The conflict, now in its fourth year, continues to draw international attention and efforts for a peaceful resolution. Let's listen to what Erdogan had to say.
Ateşkes sağlanması ve taraflar arasında güven artırıcı önlem olarak havada ve denizde saldırıların durdurulması fikrini destekliyoruz.
Joining us to discuss the latest developments is Glenn Grant, the ex-advisor to the Ukraine Defence Ministry, who's joining us from Riga in Latvia. Glenn, thank you very much for being here. I'd like to first discuss the strikes and the attacks on the energy infrastructure in Ukraine that we've seen from Russia. How pivotal is this for Russia to sort of get that foothold and continue their offensive? As we've seen, 20% of Ukraine approximately now controlled by Russia, and taking out the energy infrastructure, of course, has wider reaching impacts.
Yeah, it does. And I think we need to look at this now in the wider context, because the Trump actions in the last couple of weeks have made the whole thing a complete game changer. And that now it's quite clear to Putin that Ukraine has no support from Trump, and Trump has just pulled, as you know, he had pulled out the intelligence support, pulled away weapons support, and is even apparently talking about taking back the US Patriot missiles from inside Ukraine back over the border. I mean, what we're seeing is no longer a war of just Russia versus Ukraine. It's now turning very much into a war of two sides, with, unfortunately or amazingly, the United States on the side of Russia. So Russia's going to keep going. I mean, it has absolutely no reason to stop now. We know that the Europeans are having their meetings, and the latest plan calls for £800 billion to be spent on defence. But you can't spend £800 billion in 5 minutes, and some of that will take 7, 8, 9 years to deal with, when in fact the problem for Ukraine at the moment is literally it needs drones on the front line today, and that means money, and that means support. So there's got to be some different thinking from everybody. If we don't want Ukraine to go backwards any further, then people need to start thinking much quicker and much more focused on supporting Ukraine than they have done so far.
Yes, Glenn, just to bring in some news that we've received in the last few minutes, Trump has spoken following the overnight assaults that we've seen from Russia, and he says he is considering fresh sanctions and tariffs on Russia. We know, of course, that the US delegation is set to meet Ukrainian officials in Saudi Arabia next week. So, Glenn, I ask you this question. Do you think the tide may be turning, and tide could turn, given the fact that Trump seems willing now to communicate with Ukraine, where a week ago, after their clash in the White House, it seemed that truly had truly broken down?
Well, it's interesting, because there really wasn't a relationship before anyway, because Trump doesn't do relationships. He does power. So Zelensky was at a loss from the beginning with this whole thing. And what Trump has been doing is bullying Ukraine to give in and to make a ceasefire. And he knows full well that sanctions and other things will take time and are a very, very, very weak method of trying to actually to stop a war. So I think that we've got two sides to this. One side is Trump bullying Zelensky and trying to make things happen straight away from Zelensky, and on the other side, giving Russia things at the same time as he's pulling things away from Russia. I don't think the tide has turned. I think we've still got a long way to go with this, because nothing at the moment is there that will stop Russia.
Yes, where the US has, of course, withdrawn support to Ukraine, one country that continues to show support, a European country in the form of France. Emmanuel Macron has been outspoken in support for Ukraine. European leaders meeting on a regular basis at the moment. And we also know that French-built Mirage jets were used last night to try and stop the large Russian offensive and large Russian strikes that took place. How important do you think it is that these European nations and these European leaders stick by Ukraine during this tumultuous time?
I can't place enough emphasis on it. It is about world peace. It's as strong as that. And if Europe doesn't step up and doesn't actually support the whole Ukraine thing properly, then we can see a real slide backwards into war in other areas. Especially if US does not support Ukraine properly, then other autocratic leaders will believe that they have nothing to fear, especially China and others. So I think that there is a need now for Europe to be really, really strong and quick in the coming weeks to show that they are 100% behind Ukraine, not only in words, but actually in deed.
Glenn Grant, thank you very much for your insights. As you know, this situation is continuing to evolve day by day and hour by hour, and NewsX World is the place to get all of those updates. We now move on, and Turkey have warned against provocations in Syria's Latakia province, where recent clashes between government forces and militants loyal to Bashar al-Assad resulted in over 70 deaths, including 52 members of the Alawite minority, according to the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights. The coastal province is the heartland of the Alawite faith, to which the Assad clan belongs. Turkey's Foreign Ministry spokesperson Onku Kaseli emphasised that such actions should not threaten regional peace, reaffirming Turkey's stance against actions undermining the Syrian people's right to peace and prosperity. Turkey also pledged to continue support for the Syrians people and their administration. Joining us to discuss the situation in Syria is Mustafa Ahmed Manaf, who is a journalist joining us from Baghdad in Iraq. Thank you very much for joining us today. I really want to look at these clashes that we've seen, Mustafa, and I want to look at how the impact on peace can really be affected by what we've seen. Do you agree, firstly, with what Turkey have said, and how might this disrupt the peace efforts from the new Syrian government?
First of all, this will not affect or get impact in the peace agreement with the peace agreement that Syria has said about it. Everything is going well. Even the clashes happened in Tartus and Latakia. It's between the Syrian military and the old regime government that goes to the al-Assad people. They are fighting with each other, but it will never affect the regime. It will never affect the peace agreements between the Turkey and Syria. Everything is going well right now. Just last week, President Erdogan said that more than 133,000 Syrian came home back from Turkey to Syria. So it's not going to affect anything. The Syrian people are living the good life that they are having right now. They are happy with their life. and everything is going well. But there's all countries have its old regime terrorists that wants to come back to their country. I think everything is going well, and there's no effect in the region and the countries beside it.
Mustafa, I'd like to get an understanding from you for our audience of what the current status quo is within Syria. Of course, the Assad regime was toppled, but I want to understand, and I want our audience to understand, how much support still remains from that regime and how much support is there for action like we've seen and clashes like we've seen against the new Syrian government.
Let me tell you this, there's no support whatsoever from the people to the Al-Assad and his family again in Syria. There's no support. The only support they have is their only little dogs, we say. I'm sorry for the word. They call themselves, they are the dogs of the Al-Assad. They call themselves that. They are located in Ladiqiyah and Tartus right now. But like I said, the military, the government, the Syrian Free Country government military are now engaging with them in Tartus, and I think it's nothing. They are so little. A small group that wants to defend the Al-Assad and their family. But there's no support whatsoever in the people for Al-Assad and his family.
Mustafa, also looking at a wider geopolitical impact from clashes like this, I know you say the support is limited, but is there a risk potentially that if clashes do escalate in another scenario, that it could cause wider instability in the Middle East, to places like Iraq and also potentially into Turkey, hence the reaction that we've seen?
Like I said before, it will not going to affect any of the countries besides Syria. Like I said, the Turkey last week, the refugees from Turkey to Syria are going more than 133,000. A Syrian is returning home, and the Syrian borders are more secure than ever, especially in Iraq. In Iraq, where the government has secured all the borders between Iraq and Syria, it will not affect the people. The people in Iraq are supporting the new government in Syria. They are saying that they are doing the right thing. They just come out from the darkness to the light for once in their life. Finally, it's been more than 30 years in the Al-Assad family in the government. Like I said, it will not affect any of the countries besides Syria. Everything will be the right thing. They are doing the right thing right now. It's like a river, a boat floating in a river. Everything is fine. It will not affect any of the countries, not now, not even in the future.
Yes, and Mustafa, to bring our discussion to a conclusion, the situation, of course, in Syria is still very unstable. We've spoken on this programme before about the sheer levels of unemployment, the amount of people living in poverty, the amount of time it would take at the current trajectory for the country's economy to recover. So what more can other nations do outside of potentially just the Middle East to make sure that that rebuild happens and the people of Syria get the support that they need and the government get the support that they need to make sure that Syria can be rebuilt to where it wants to be?
Well, we have to stick together. As an Arab country, Iraq are planning to stick with Syria, even though there's a small talk about from the Shia part that they are saying that the new president are bad, especially for the Iraqis, because Iraqis, most of them doesn't want to help the new government because the president of the new Syria have problems in Iraq. One of them, the bombing that happened in 2006, the Iraqis are accusing the new president of Syria. So most of the Shia and most of the Iraqis doesn't support the new government, but some people here in Iraq and some people all over the world want to support Syria by giving them the right amount of love and the right amount of support that they need from the world so they can rebuild again. There are the countries like Turkey, Iraq, Jordan. They are helping right now Syria to rebuild again and see Syria the sun again from the past 30 years. Now it's the time for Syria to see the sun and have hope like any humans in the world.
Mustafa Ahmed Munaf, thank you so much for your insight there. We really do appreciate it. That is unfortunately all we have time for, but we'll be back very soon with more of your latest international news.